Good. I do, yes. I have to call it to order. Everybody ready? Sure. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2019 reorganization meeting for the Lower Paxton Township Authority. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Mr. Eby.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I know. Thank you, Mr. Eby. Next item on the agenda is election of the chairman of the board, and I will open the floor to nominations.
Mr. Chairman, I will nominate David Blaine to serve as chairman of the Authority Board.
Is there a second to that motion?
I will second.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that nominations be closed for chairman.
Everyone in favor of Mr. Blaine serving as chairman of the Authority Board, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Congratulations, Mr. Blaine.
Congratulations.
Board, I appreciate everybody's vote and vote of confidence.
David, can you turn it?
Board and Mr. Stein, I appreciate everybody's vote of confidence to be able to serve another year as chairman. And without further ado, let's get this party started. So first item of business is going to be the election of the vice chairman of the board.
Okay, where we go? What did I do?
Any nominations for vice chair of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I nominate Gary Chrisman for vice chair.
Is there, Mr. Christman's name is in nomination, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Ms. Lindsay. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
So carried. Next item of business will be election of the secretary of the board.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to put the name of nomination of Justin Eby for secretary of the board.
Nomination for Mr. Eby as secretary. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Mr. Chrisman. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Next item of business will be the election of the authority treasurer. Board will entertain nominations.
Where are we? Mr. Chairman, I'll nominate Robin Lindsay to serve as the secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chrisman. Is there a second to?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Zumas.
Congratulations.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Last and final nomination here would be election of the assistant secretary. Board will entertain a motion for that.
I'd like to put the name and nomination of Chris Judd for assistant secretary.
Mr. Judge's name's nomination. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Chrisman. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Next will be the appointment of the authority solicitor. The authority solicitor, the board, the chair would like to put the name of law office of Steve Stein into nomination. Is there a second?
Decline on this.
Second.
Second by Mr. Judd. Any further discussion?
I'll call for the question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Next item will be the appointment of the authority stormwater engineer. Again, the chair would like to put into nomination the firm of HRG as the authority stormwater engineer. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Mr. Chrisman. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Next item will be the appointment of the authority sanitary sewer engineer. The chair would like to put into nomination the firm of GHD. Is there a second?
Second, Mr.
Second
Chairman.
by Mr. Chrisman. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? So carried. Final item of business will be the establishment of the regular meeting schedule for the board. That meeting schedule will be established as the fourth Tuesday of the second month of each quarter. So that would be tonight, February 26th, Tuesday, May 28th, 2019, Tuesday, August 27th, 2019, and Tuesday, November 26th, 2019. The meeting time will be 7 p.m. here in this room. Additional meetings that may be held would be potentially for any business that would be other than normal business for the need for a convening would be March 19th, April 16th, May 21st, June 18th, July 16th, August 20th, September 17th, October 22nd, November 19th, and December 17th. Again, those secondary dates would be if there is the need to take action on a certain matter that would require us to get together. That can't wait till the normal quarterly meeting.
Right.
With that said,
New member now or later?
oh, one second, let's get here. With that said, I think we can then move into the business meeting of the general authority. So first item of business will be the approval of the minutes from October 16th, 2018, and from November 27th, 2018.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the minutes of October 16, 2018, and the minutes of November 27th, 2018, as prepared and circulated.
Thank you, Mr. Crispin. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Zumas. You got there just, he inched you out there, Chris.
Hit the buzzer.
Any further comment, discussion? Any? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? So carried. Next item of business will be public comment. This will be anything that would be related to the municipal authority business. So that would be anything related to the sanitary sewer or stormwater management. Hearing no public comment, we will go to board and chair comments. So the first comment I'd like to make is to welcome our newest board member, Mr. David Ramsey. Mr. Ramsey, welcome to the board. Would you like to take a minute to introduce yourself and say a few words?
Certainly. I was asked to perhaps put in my application for the board by the gentleman at the end of the row here, Mr. Eby. We worked together briefly for Lower Allen Township Authority. I started with the Lower Allen Township Authority, Sanitary Sewer Authority in 1983. Came in as an operator. From then on, I obtained my Class 1 operator's license, my Class A license, 1 through 4. I was involved in collection system investigations as a collection system foreman, running TV trucks and all manner of things associated with that. I retired last year as the superintendent of the Lower Allen Township Authority, assistant manager. During my tenure there, we went through the Chesapeake Bay upgrades, the mandated upgrades for point sources, which was interesting times. So I was involved in a lot of collection system upgrades and construction projects, both developer and authority initiated. So I have a little experience with authority matters, and hopefully I can be of some use to this board.
Mr. Ramsey, we want to welcome you to the board. I'm sure you'll be you'll bring a lot of value to the board with your background and experience. So again, we welcome you. And any other further comments from the board on any other matters before we go into business? Okay. All right. So the first item of business will be under the Stormwater Fund. We'll break the agenda out between the Stormwater Fund and which is the Sanitary Sewer Fund. The first item of business will be action on Resolution 1901, establishing a user fee for Stormwater Management Program, and already at the podium is the esteemed Mr. Weaver. All right, sir. Have at it, brother.
Steve.
Hey, Bill, is your mic on?
Oh, there we go. Again, Resolution 1901 is in final form and ready for board action this evening. As you may recall, the draft resolution was prepared by Raf Tellison, modified by staff, and solicitor. I want to highlight just a few key components in the resolution. Under the definitions, the developed parcel. The developed parcel basically includes anyone that has more than 340 square feet of impervious surface, and impervious surface is also defined in the resolution. We sent the final resolution to Raftellus just yesterday, and they did have one comment, and I wanted to highlight that comment, that it was included in your packet. The only comment they had was that the definition for impervious surface should include a surface that prevents or substantially impedes the percolation of water into the ground. So that has been added into your packet, that revision. It was sort of covered already with the gravel or crushed stone as an impervious surface, but they wanted to clearly highlight that it includes other things that could substantially impede the percolation as defined as an impervious surface. Just a few other highlights I'd like to provide the board. Many of the board members are aware that this resolution format is similar to our sewer billing resolution. The rate structure, call your attention to section 6, basically just establishes a flat rate of $32 per quarter for each single-family residential parcel. Non-single-family parcels, we term as NSFRs, with 3,400 square feet or less, pay the equivalent residential unit rate of $32 per quarter. So similar to sewer, where we bill based on EDUs, equivalent domestic units, for stormwater, we bill in equivalent residential units. So this equivalent residential rate is $32 per quarter, and any NSFR that exceeds 1 ERU will then pay additional ERUs and equivalents. So it's basically just set up just like sewer. And I provided an example in your packet where, for an example, a commercial property has 2.8 ERUs. They would then pay $32 times 2.8, or $89.60 per quarter. Now, many municipalities, according to Raftellus, round to the nearest whole number. We felt it was more fair and more precise to but use decimals. And that's a one-time calculation that's put into the software. Staff concluded that calculating an infraction is easily achievable, and that is in final form for your consideration this evening. Two other sections I want to quickly highlight: billing and collection, appeals of disputed bills and adjustments. The resolution refers appeals to the procedures outlined in a written policy as adopted by resolution of the authority. So staff has started the revisions to the sewer billing collection policy. It is under township reports. I'll provide a few highlights. It is not necessary to have any action on that document this evening because obviously we haven't sent any bills out yet. So those bills will go out in July. And once we start receiving appeals, then they would follow that procedure that would be in that document. And that document will be ready for board action for the joint meeting in March or in May at the latest. We have provided a sample appeal form also that is in your packet. So just a few issues on the appeals and what staff anticipates that we could receive appeals would be a property that's billed as NSFR but is actually SFR. So out of all the 1,400 commercial properties, the coding that Raftellus used was basically from the county website. Staff, Randy Allen, our MS4 coordinator. Is Randy here? Oh.
Great.
Thankfully, Randy volunteered to assist, and he did tremendous work in clearing up a good many properties, but there's still a lot of work to do. And it's not a guarantee that we're going to have every property billed correctly initially. We hope to, but we can only go based on the data that we have. Other appeals that we could have was impervious square feet billed is incorrect, and they would fill out the appeal form and have to provide proof that the impervious surface that we calculated is incorrect. And then the third one that we anticipate that Randy had pointed out is the parcel lot lines from county data is many times incorrect. And that could change the total square feet of impervious square feet that is being billed. But typically it shouldn't change it a whole lot because obviously the parcel lines are on the end. So most of the impervious surface is not at the end of the property. We don't anticipate a whole lot with that. But I wanted just to give you some examples. We have 1,400 properties. You know, typically from talking to the other municipalities, when they started a program, you can expect 10 to 15% appeals. So we're looking at maybe initially 210 to deal with over the next year. Finally, exemptions. Just wanted to provide a little background on that. The public road right-of-ways are exempt, which includes PennDOT roads and township roads. And we also exempt single-family residential private streets. All properties with impervious surface over 340 square feet must receive a user fee. There are no exemptions. Finally, we may receive some complaints from those property owners that have a undeveloped parcel with no structure. We anticipate right now only about 82 of those. Again, this is based on some review of some aerial photography. That number could increase after Randy and staff meets with Raftellus again and drills down on that number as well. But essentially, that is just parcels that do not have a structure, but they could have done improvements to it. It could have some gravel driveways. So 340 square feet was kind of a struggle for staff and Raftellus to come up with that number of 340. Many townships use 300 or 500 that we found, and we couldn't figure out how they developed that number. And after many discussions, we concluded that it's the number that is most defensible by appeal that the engineer could substantiate, we could identify. So if you look at 340 square feet, that's essentially 30 by 10 area. So the aerial photography these days is very accurate, and you can substantiate that that impervious surface exists in that 30 by 10 area. So we believe that is why most of the municipalities established that number. We were comfortable recommending that for the board tonight. And then finally, one last comment, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The settlement agencies will need to collect a stormwater fee beginning April 1st for any settlement that occurs April 1st or following. Since we are billing in July, that covers the arrears, or we bill in arrears for the quarter of April, May, and June. If there's any reason that the board decides to table the resolution, then staff would recommend that the board reconsider the resolution no later than the March 19th joint meeting that's going to be scheduled. That concludes my report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on Resolution 1901.
Bill, the data from the county, when was the last time it was updated?
Parcel data or
The parcel data. You said you were using the data from the county?
Yeah, so the parcel data actually comes from our land development plans, which they are using. The newer data should be correct. What we're talking about is, plans from 40, 50 years ago. Where
Okay. I was just curious how old the data was that you were using. So you're saying there's 1,400 commercial properties and how many residential properties?
with the data, there's 17,800 ERUs. So out of the 17,800, then 1,400 of those would
Is it
be
commercial? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
But when you asked about the data,
Yeah.
how old it is, then, geez, I don't know when the township, Steve, would have been accepting subdivision plans here. That would be how old the data would be.
Well, they've been accepting subdivision plans since maybe the 1800s.
No. I
Yeah,
meant
they just
how,
weren't under
when
the
was the last time
MPC
it was
then.
updated? Meaning, how new is the data that you're using?
Well, that's what I'm getting at. The
Oh,
parcel
okay.
data goes back to originally when the county started getting data from the townships
Okay.
to show parcels.
Okay.
So to get more specific, the only way that you can get an accurate picture of your parcel is to have it surveyed and then confirm your points based on your deed. To go to our level to bill 1,400 properties, we certainly don't want to have that effort.
Right,
to
right.
do stormwater user fee billing. And again, it should not be an issue with stormwater user fee billing because the impervious surface is usually not right on the parcel lines.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
I think it's important to make sure that that everybody's aware that the budget that was built for the stormwater for the stormwater activity was built around $32 a quarter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did fail to
Yeah, so
point
I
out.
just want to make sure that this body passed the budget for the stormwater management back in December. It was
Yes.
passed based upon the resolution that's in front of us for the stormwater user fees of $32, as well as the adjustments for the ERU fees for over 3,400 square feet. So just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. And was also passed at the time that we would start the billing for this in July 1st and going forward.
Right.
Yes, just to, if I may, Mr. Chairman, the model that Raftel has provided was a 5-year model based on revenues that were needed to substantially complete the improvements necessary under our MS4 MPDS permit requirements. They did, one of their deliverables under their task items, under task 3, was to provide a new rate model based on looking at this billing resolution. So I did want to just briefly point out as well that with the rounding being changed to fractions, it did reduce the total ERUs slightly and did reduce revenues by like $50,000 a year, but we are billing $4.2 million and we haven't collected any revenue yet, and we thought it was more fair. So I did want to point that out to the board as well, and neglected to do that, but so thank you for bringing up the rate model. Raftelis does again recommend approval of Resolution 1901 and that this rate schedule will satisfy the model that they delivered to the board.
And Bill, I guess this is probably a good time, even though this has been talked about publicly for, I guess, over a year, and then intensely over the last few months. We should probably quickly just say, what will the funds be used for generally? What kind of projects? And what does the township have to do them? Is this an option for us, or are those projects something we have to do? You mentioned briefly about
Yes.
our permit.
Correct. As part of the resolution, there is a separate stormwater management fund that you're referring to that will be established by the board from adopting this resolution. And all revenues from the stormwater user fee have to be designated for stormwater management program projects. And ironically, that's the next agenda item, which is 19-02, including private improvements as well. So the fund will be used for anything that is stormwater related for compliance with our MPDS permit and our MS4 program, and any other improvements that are recommended by the Public Works Department or the engineer to maintain the authority's stormwater facilities.
Okay. Mr. Weaver, thank you for the
A quick
thorough discussion. Yes, Mr. Zumas.
Mr. Weaver, I know, as Mr. Judd just pointed out, we've done a pretty good job of communicating this via the website, public meetings, etc. And I know at the last billing cycle, I believe there was something mentioned in the sewer bill that would indicate that it was going to be forthcoming. And my wife pays the bills, thank goodness, so I didn't read how it was worded. Do we have, would it be beneficial to put something in the next bill that would indicate the how it was developed, why it was developed, and a brief explanation of an unfunded mandate? Because I've still talked to people that don't understand it. And looking at the internet, there's rumors flying all over the place about what it is, how it was developed, what it's called, and social media takes off and it goes crazy.
Well, I do, just real quick, Mr. Zumas, I think the bills, we usually direct them to our webpage at the township website, which I believe addresses the real basics and the why and the unfunded mandate. I didn't see the
Some of those
last thing.
senior people don't even have a computer.
Right. Well, I don't know how much we're still explaining it. We did actually explain it in the hard copy, the last round of bills. I don't know if we did it this time.
Well, to answer Mr. Zumas's question, the communications manager has already thought of this and does plan on putting an article in the newsletter
Good.
and also
Great,
updating the webpage.
great. Thank you.
And we will need to continue saying this, and especially in July, we'll have to say it again and again.
Yes.
Even though we'll say we've told you for a year, we're still going to we're going to have to start now. Every time we have the opportunity to publicly say it, it's an unfunded mandate. And I think that's the key that everybody needs to know and understand in our community. It's not something we have imposed, but it has been imposed upon us without any financial assistance. So each and every one of us as taxpayers will be required to support that. And we're just going to have to say it every time we have an opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Weaver.
Agreed.
Mr. Weaver, real quick, how many parcels that will be billed with the stormwater are not currently on the sewer billing? So,
Surprising, not that many. About 560 are septic systems that are single family, not a whole lot of commercial. So there's already been notices given to those people to advise them that they have to start cleaning their septic system. And also, the communications manager did recommend, if the resolution is approved tonight, that we do send notices to those folks as well, notifying them to expect a stormwater user fee in July. So we intend to mail those folks a letter as well,
it sounds like you have it all covered.
so far.
Bill, I don't know if this is for you or for Jeff. The question's been asked, what are the projects that we're going to be doing this year? I know it's on the website, but I think maybe if you could say tonight for the people that don't have a computer, Jeff or Bill. I mean, I know what they are, but I would like to, you guys to say it so that the public can hear it.
The projects that are going out for bid are, we're finishing a run in Forest Hills, on Forest Hills Drive, from one end to the other, basically. That will complete a run that we started about 3 years ago. This will be our third entry into it. And we're correcting a problem where Goose Valley Road was being undermined. They're the two projects. I don't think there's another one. Stonebridge. Well, that would be Randy's.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
And
I
then-
meant the stormwater.
Yeah, that's,
Okay, because I read on the internet that it was Stonebridge.
well, that's what I was saying. Randy's handling that one. That
Oh,
has to do
okay.
with the MS4. So
Okay, so
so
the
that is, but that's separate. Is that on our contract?
No, that's.
Right, that's separate from the actual stormwater improvements.
Oh, okay, because maybe I misread on the internet. I thought I read that under the stormwater.
It's still under stormwater, but it's
Okay.
it's separated from the two projects I just mentioned.
Okay, so it'll be the Stonebridge, and then it said Earl Drive 1, 2, and 3 is what's on the internet. So I'm just
I'm gonna have to
assuring.
look at now.
Okay, I'm
Now.
just assuring, because people are asking, and
No.
I went to the website under the stormwater, and that's what it said, so I just
Right.
wanted-
Well, just to comment on that, there were some changes because these projects are going to be delayed, and Jeff wanted to do some work right away. So,
I'm sorry, Bill, that still wouldn't be Earl Drive, though. That would be everything in
Yeah.
your area that gets delayed till next year.
but initially, Mr. Wolf established the 5-year 7.3.
Earl Drive,
Yeah.
okay, I'm sorry. Earl Drive would probably be that stream behind where we met out there with the.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's on the
that's-
internet for, it said projects for, am I
That-
right, Brad?
You're not doing that anymore.
Projects for this
No,
year.
that is not this
So we'll
year.
have to correct that.
Okay, so you're finishing the because people have asked, so you're finishing the Forest Hills, and then you're finishing Goose Valley
And then Stonebridge.
and Stonebridge,
Yes.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions for staff at this point? If there's no further questions for staff, then Chair will entertain a motion to approve Resolution 1901.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Resolution 2019-01, which establishes the user fees for the Stormwater Management Program as presented by and recommended by Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Crispin. There's a motion on the table for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Eby. Any further discussion? If not, I think we can do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So carried. Okay. Next item of business, on the heels of that will be Resolution 1902, establishing a policy for completing stormwater improvements on private property. Mr. Weaver, again, is at the podium.
Thank
You
you,
can have at it there, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You have Resolution 1902 is in final form and ready for board action this evening. This policy is necessitated by the upcoming township and authority MPDS permit. The permit will require stream bank restoration projects, which we just mentioned, which are on private property. The permit requires 35% sediment reduction in 5 years under the TMDL in Paxton Creek and 10% total township-wide. This is to be accomplished by the stream bank projects. I have attached a copy of the requirements from the township MPDS permit, which we're operating under our general permit. We haven't received an individual permit as of yet. That is under review by the department. In addition, the policy is required in order to improve private stormwater systems that are part of the BC2 project that's planned in 2019. The project is part of the Stormwater Management Program. The Management Program project is defined in the resolution under Section 2 as a project designed by the authority stormwater system engineer to protect, restore, or manage stormwater quality by controlling and reducing pollutants. Any project to reduce or manage stormwater quantity by controlling velocity, volume, rate of stormwater. So I wanted to highlight that definition of stormwater management project. That's essentially the whole crux of this resolution, that by adopting this policy, the board will authorize the township staff and engineer to select projects for the authority to consider based on that definition. So again, essentially, this policy is needed because now the authority will be required to go on private property to do work to comply with their permit. It's very similar, again, parallel to the sewer consent decree. As you're aware, we had to go on private property and replace building sewers within each mini basin. So there is the parallel.
Okay.
So just briefly as well, the initial solicitor opinion, and Steve will have to chime in. I don't want to speak for the solicitor, but the recorded lot owners of record typically own the private stormwater systems, and initially Solicitor Stein had recommended that the township at the time owned the storm sewers do not improve those systems. However, the solicitor now recommends this policy be adopted because of the MS4 requirements that are going to require that we improve the entire system, which includes the private conveyance systems as well. Steve, you want to?
Sure, because usually private property owners are not going to improve a stormwater system that goes through their property, nor do they have the wherewithal to do that. And if the authority doesn't do it, it's not going to get done. And then if the system is not in compliance with the permit or the MS4 program, the township or the authority could get fined by EPA or DEP, and those fines are usually fairly steep. So it's good financial management, I think, to just take the private system and maintain it, keep it in good condition, and then stay in compliance with the MS4 program. And then we can avoid having to pay fines to another governmental entity.
One final comment by staff actually comes from Mr. Wolf, who is not here this evening. Mr. Wolf wanted to point out that Section 1C, improvements necessary for the protection of public health, safety, and welfare as determined by the township and the authority. George's comment was that this is not clearly defined, and the township authority would have to determine, as recommended by staff and engineer, when they want to do these type of projects. His concern was that you could have a lot of requests. So we met with Steve, we looked at this and the engineer, and basically the conclusion is that A and C, so Section 1A and C, or essentially the same because anything that the township authority would direct us to do under the stormwater management program, most of the time will also involve public health, safety, and welfare. The example is Nancy Drive. As the board is aware, there's a sinkhole in the area. That's a safety issue. Also, you have sediment entering the storm sewer, which, as I just described, we have to remove 35% of the sediment in Paxton Creek and 10% township-wide. So Mr. Wolf he recommends the board approve the resolution, but he also wanted to point out that be aware that you could get a lot of requests under that public safety definition. And staff is aware of that. We agree with Mr. Wolf. That can occur. But solicitor and engineer would have to agree that there is a public, and the board, of course, that there is a public safety issue. And typically, again, it's going to be sinkholes on private property that are a safety issue, or it could be contributing sediment into the system. I'll be happy to answer any questions on Resolution 1902.
So it doesn't make sense just to strike C entirely. We need that.
Well, that's for the board to decide. That's Mr. Wolf wanted to just put that out there and let the board take action as appropriate.
But the solicitor's not recommending that we do that.
I'm sorry that we remove C.
Yeah.
I think you need that because that addresses, in my mind, it addresses a slightly different issue than A, even though they're similar, because it addresses, as Mr. Weaver said, the issue where somebody, as a result of a failing system, has a sinkhole on their property, and that's fairly substantial in size. And I think the Nancy Drive example is how that came about.
Does that include the one, I don't know if it's Country Lake, Hidden Lake?
I believe there is something on Hidden Lake, but I can't remember
Okay,
exactly what
okay,
it
so
is.
it's that one also?
Yes, actually, we are having a meeting next week about Hidden Lake as
Because
well.
that one's pretty big up there.
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Weaver, you had mentioned that the board would have to approve certain projects. Is that something that's going to be vetted by staff first, or some kind of policy? Because we had issues before of determining whether or not we go back many years with sewer funds because we weren't billing them because we didn't know they had a system. And we kind of, certain circumstances come to the board, but most of that's handled by staff nowadays.
Well, I think the distinction, again, is like sewer. You're going to have a capital program where you're using bond money to do those improvements, and you're going to have Jeff doing his normal maintenance under the operations fund. If it's a capital program, then that'll have to be approved by the board. The staff doesn't have the ability to do capital improvements without the board adopting the work plan. So that'll be the board's decision, basically.
Okay. Any other further comments for staff at this point in time?
I had one
Sure.
comment. In Section 5, property owners who desire to transfer a private stormwater system easement and any private stormwater system facilities, is that voluntary?
Well, let's put it this way: for the authority to enter the property and do the work, spending public money, it was thought it was a good idea that we obtain ownership of an easement and any existing infrastructure that's there.
Understand, but this almost reads like it is a decision to be made by the property owner.
Well, obviously, we approach them and say, if you want us to work on this system on your property, you're going to have to dedicate it to us. If you don't, that's fine, and then
Okay.
we'll just go somewhere else.
So, in order for the work to be done, it must be dedicated.
Correct.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yep, no problem. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion for approval of Resolution 1902.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Resolution 2019-02, which establishes the policy for completing stormwater improvements on private property as presented and recommended by Mr. Weaver.
Mr. Chrisman, thank you very much. Is there a second to approval of Resolution 1902?
Second.
Second by Mr. Eby. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we can do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to Resolution 190301 to 190318, authorizing the acquisition of permanent and temporary construction easements in the BC2 A, B, and C project.
Mr. Chairman, I'd raise to a point of order. Since Mr. Hines is going to discuss 190301 through 18, I would ask that he also do 190401 through 190403, because I think we, in formal motion, we can authorize both of these in the same motion.
I don't see any problem with that. Anybody see a problem with that on this board? Okay. Mr. Hines, you're the man. You're up.
Thanks. Good evening, board members. Resolution 190301 through 18 serves to authorize authority staff and HRG to engage 18 property owners that are affected by the BC2A through C project into easement acquisition. These are all related to stormwater work, separate from any sanitary sewer work for which separate easements were already being pursued. Also in conjunction with that, resolutions 190401 through 03 are of a similar nature, just with the Forest Hills and Goose Valley Road Colonial Club Drive project that Mr. Klein referenced earlier in the meeting.
Okay. Any board questions for staff? Okay, hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion on the combined resolutions of 190301 through 190318, as well as 190401 through 190403.
Good.
I think Mr. Christmas is going to step up to the plate on this one.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Resolution 2019-03-01 through 2019-03-18 and Resolution 190401 and 2019-04 through 3, and in both resolutions authorizing the acquisition of permanent and temporary construction easements, in one case in the BC2 ABC project and for the 2019 drainage improvement projects as outlined, recommended by Mr. Hines.
Thank you there, Mr. Crispin. I appreciate that. Is there a second to Mr. Crispin's motion?
I'll second it.
Second by Ms. Lindsay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I think we can do this by voice acclamation as well. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right. Now we're going to go to township reports. And Mr. Weaver is back.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I briefly mentioned the draft stormwater user fee, sanitary sewer rental billing and collection policy that is in your packet in draft form, along with the Exhibit 3 draft appeal form. Again, staff will finalize this document and have it ready for board action either at the March 19th joint meeting or at the May quarterly meeting. Again, we have to have this in place to accept the appeals, and also as a reminder, the policy was recommended by Modern Recovery, or a collection agency, and the purpose was that we have a clear and concise billing and collection policy to offset any risk that we would have from lawsuits from people that would take issue with how we are collecting our accounts. So that has how all that policy started. You'll see in your packet I did insert the word stormwater where appropriate, and we are working out some of the bugs. This is very unique because it is the first time that we've ever done stormwater, of course, so the solicitor is crucial in this matter. So Steve has been doing a lot of work and a lot of research. There's two issues that I'll just highlight briefly, and we'll go over more when we present the document for final approval. Steve has considered, based on his research to date, that the stormwater user fee is a utility under the definition of sewer, so it is a lienable item. So during collection, we can pursue under that policy as a lienable item. What's unclear is whether or not you can shut someone's water off as you do for sanitary sewer for unpaid bills. Steve looked at the statute, and it's really interesting because it does mention the word sewer, but it also mentions the word sewage and treatment facilities. So Steve and I just discussed it. We need to do more research. We don't believe that it'll be an issue because, as Mr. Eby asked, there's only 590 properties that are stormwater billing only. And since the money goes to stormwater first and then sanitary second, we don't anticipate the need to shut people's water off for an unpaid stormwater user fee. So I just wanted to provide a brief report. I'll be happy to answer any questions on the draft policy that's in your packet right now.
Bill, how long will you let it go if they don't pay their quarterly stormwater bill?
We established in the policy a maximum allowed amount on your account balance before it goes to collection. So we're anticipating proposing to the board for stormwater only $300. We also have to change the initial for the sewer was $300, but now we're adding a stormwater bill. Right. So there's going to be a policy that we're going to propose to you that's going to have a combined bill of sanitary sewer and stormwater. So we're going to have to raise that $300 amount now because you're going to have stormwater as part of that. So if you're getting billed $32 a quarter, $128 a year, then it's going to take you pretty long to get to $300 for stormwater. So we don't really need to go collecting stormwater user fees. But that's going to be up to the board what they want to establish that at. We initially think we're going to propose $300 for stormwater only and raising the combined amount to $400 or $500.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
The other important part is when you lien delinquent sewer bills, is you're supposed to lien them within 3 years of when the delinquency begins.
Ah.
So if you
That's
don't
kinda
do
close.
that, if you don't do that, you can lose priority, which you don't want to lose your priority because you have priority over basically everyone, including the first mortgage.
So it's 3 years from when the delinquency begins.
Right. So let's say you have a delinquency that begins in July, and more than 3 years go by. Any of those delinquency periods that are not within that 3-year period, you're going to lose priority.
Right. So it sounds like we should probably establish it to be safe around 200. That would allow you time to get a lien filed. Thank you, Steve.
It obviously sounds like you collectively still have work to do.
Yes,
even as I was having a sidebar.
That's why it's under township reports and not new business.
Having a sidebar with Mr. Stein with regard to the progressiveness. You know, do we send them a letter the first time? Then do we have a personal visit? And then before we would shut down water? And I know those are things that you have to still iron out and put in your final document. My question then deals with when do you anticipate submitting it for approval? Because our next meeting's not till May 28th, isn't it?
That's correct.
And so will we need a special meeting to approve this prior to May 28th?
We do not, but ironically, I'm glad you mentioned that. I do want to take an opportunity right now that I think Brad wanted to also talk about a joint meeting on March 19th for a joint bond issue with the authority and the township. So we would take the opportunity at that meeting, hopefully, to have a final document that you could approve. Did you want to make a comment about that, Brad, about the joint meeting?
Yeah, sure. So actually in the Board of Supervisors items of interest in a couple of weeks anyway, I had been proposing a joint meeting between the board and the authority board for purposes of discussing particularly the 2019 bond issuance because the authority will have a number of items in there as it relates to stormwater. So that would be a good time to get both boards together to discuss those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
As a result, Mr. Weaver, you and Mr. Stein believe that you'll have your document in place for submission for consideration for adoption by this board on that evening.
Correct.
Okay, good.
If there's no other questions on the draft policy, I only have one other township report item. I was talking to Mr. Klein and Mr. Allen, the MS4 coordinator, and HRG. Since the authority is new, of course, you just took ownership of the brand new stormwater system. Not so brand new. So the stormwater system is going to have a individual permit issued at some point in time. There is a delay there because DEP is overwhelmed with issuing permits. So I asked Jason if it would be possible at the May quarterly meeting to provide a board presentation. I believe he did one for the township many years ago. Just a little bit of a history about how MS4 was started, what the requirements are, what to expect in our permit, and just basically that meeting will have a designated time of 15 to 30 minutes for Jason to do that. So I thought that would be helpful. That concludes my
Kind
report.
of the reason why we've been doing all this, right?
Yeah, right.
Ultimately, is for that.
And again, the board members are concerned about the public understanding. We will certainly put it out there that this presentation will be done so they could come to the meeting or watch. That would be good.
Great.
Mr. Weaver,
Yes, that concludes my reports.
great job, Mr. Weaver. I think we're going to go to engineers report now. Always some of the most exciting parts of the meeting when we get to the engineer report. So, does anybody from HRG want to take a stab at the engineers report? Anything they want to discuss, or is the report as presented all you really have to present, and that's all you want to do?
I could just give you a brief summary,
Okay.
board members. We've been assisting authority and township staff with various items, including MS4 program implementation, construction project design on the BC2A through C project, the Forest Hills Goose Valley Road project that was referenced earlier, a few other drainage improvement related projects, the Stone Bridge apartment stream restoration, LPTA storage facility, as well as some other various miscellaneous items that have come up in the course of daily routine. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions you may have specifically about any of those items.
Any questions on the engineers report as presented?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Hearing
you.
none, we will move right to the sanitary sewer fund. First item of business will be Resolution 1905, authorizing the acquisition of a temporary construction easement of a private sewer replacement in BC 5B.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you have in your packet 19-05 and 1906. As Mr. Chrisman prefers, you could take action on these together.
Right.
They are identical resolutions except for the obvious property owner difference. The only twist to this is that they don't actually use the private sewer. The private sewer services the property to the rear. This is a old farm, so to speak, that was part of the Row Lane subdivision area. So the phase one was done in the front end, and the sewer that was pre-existing for that farm was allowed to stay. There is recorded information, partially recorded. So Mr. Stein, again, can chime in. I don't want to speak for the solicitor. Although that the property owner does not own the private sewer, Mr. Stein believes that the authority is required to replace the private sewer because of our consent decree, which requires that we replace all private sewers within the mini basin. So these resolutions effectively will allow the solicitor and staff to acquire the easement necessary to replace the private sewer that services the property to the rear. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Bill, refresh my memory. Wesley Drive, vicinity of what?
Well, that's the Blue Ridge Avenue, would be north of Blue Ridge Avenue.
Yeah, it's Inglewood Heights.
Oh, yeah.
thank you.
Oh,
Inglewood
okay.
Heights, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions on the resolution?
Any other questions by board members? Okay, hearing none. Chair will entertain a motion on resolutions 1905 and 1906.
Right. Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve resolutions 2019-05 and resolution 2019-06, which authorizes the acquisition of the temporary construction easements for private sewer replacements in the BC 5 project as presented and recommended by Mr. Weaver.
Mr. Crispin, thank you. Is there a second to Mr. Crispin's motion?
Second.
Second by Mr. Judd. Mr. Judd, you hustled in on that one. Letting anybody go to beat you out on that second. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I think we can do this by voice acclamation as well. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right, township reports. BC 2A, BC, BC 5B, Penvest Loan Project.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as you're aware, staff and GHD prepared the Penvest application submitted, was considered by the Penvest board in January. We did get approval from Penvest. We received a funding offer, which I accepted under a DocuSign. Everything is pretty much online and very seamless so far. At this point, we have 4 sets of conference calls. We anticipate closing on the loan sometime in May or June of this year. I put the funding offer in your packet. Essentially, it's 1.5% interest for the first 5 years and 2% for the remaining 15 years of the 20-year term. Any questions on the Penvest loan?
Not at this point in time. Any questions from any other board members on the Penvest document, Penvest loan application?
Just, every time I have to ask is where this work is.
So the BC2 project would be everything north and south of Blue Ridge Avenue, 650 properties. There's a small area that's part of the Penvest project that's also in Spring Creek, which is down on Spring Creek Road next to McDevitt. And that goes north all the way up to Union Deposit Road. That's a smaller project with only 140 properties. The Penvest loan requires all work to be completed within 3 years of closing, so we anticipate all this work to be done from the period of July 19 to July 2021. 22, excuse me. Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr.
Yeah.
Weaver, I just had one just for my own knowledge. When did they start including nutrient credits into Penvest loans, or has that been done for quite some time? I was just reading this and it said that if, which the township won't be doing, selling nutrient credits, but Penvest wants them if you do sell them. Have they been doing that for?
Maybe Kevin or Jason could speak to that. This is our second Penvest loan. We did one in 2009. So I'm actually not, I apologize. I can find out for you certainly, and ask GHD and HRG.
It's not important as far as the loan goes. I was just curious when they started including that.
Well, I know we do, Swanner Township Authority does actually, that's the next agenda item I'm going to report on, is they do sell credits from their treatment facility. So it's very commonplace now that credits are available to be transferred between individual authorities.
Right.
And I can see the policy as a recommendation from the state because they encourage the participation in that policy. So that must just be an encouragement. But I can check more and get you a better answer.
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Kevin,
it
do you
seems
know?
like they're confiscating.
Is your mic on, Dave?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be for wastewater treatment plants, so obviously it doesn't apply to lower taxes because you don't have a wastewater treatment plant. And
Right.
I have not been involved in doing it for other clients through the Penvest option. It really hasn't been generating too much lately, I don't think, because of the supply and demand. There's a lot of private deals that are being made for credits that are available.
Understand. I'm not familiar with Penvest loans either. I was just
Yeah.
surprised to see that they would confiscate any nutrient credits that were produced.
Yeah, well, we just had that discussion today, Mr. Stein, about sometimes they ask a lot as part of these financings. We're going through that right now.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Weaver. Anything you want to talk about with SC2B lining in the Penvest Loan Project public meeting that's coming up here in March.
Yes, board members, March 25th at 7 p.m. in this room, we will have our typical public meeting to advise the people that are affected by this project. Staff and the engineer do a brief 30-minute PowerPoint presentation, answer any questions they have, and also get signed agreements. Again, there's approximately 140 properties in that project. We anticipate that to be bid after BC2, which wouldn't start until 2020. That's all I have to report on that.
Where's this one at, Mr. Weaver?
That's the one down by McDevitt off of Spring Creek Road, and then
Okay.
everything north of McDevitt up to UD Road. And then I just have a couple other quick reports. I did provide in your packet a letter from DEP regarding Wilshire Road back in 2014 regarding the proposed pump station in Phase 2 of Wilshire Estates. I'm happy to report that Mr. McNaughton, the owner of the owner that just recently purchased Wilshire Estates, has submitted plans for Phase 2 and has contacted the authority about the possibility of eliminating the pump station. They've lost some lots to certain factors, which I'm not totally privy to. I know one was wetlands. So they want to put 3 houses on grinder pumps and not put the pump station in. Our participation was the 12 property owners that are on Wilshire Road where there was a dry sewer. So meeting with the engineer and staff, it's our recommendation that we permit Wilshire Phase 2 to be constructed without the pump station. Therefore, the authority won't own a pump station, and we won't have to pay for half its cost. That'll save the authority a considerable amount of money. We can simply put in a force main on Wilshire Road and allow those property owners to hook up if they ever have a failing system in the future. And it actually will save them a lot of money as well because the costs are significantly less. So I just wanted to point out that good news. Also, we had our annual meeting at Swatera. That was held on February 18th. Mr. Shannon and I attended that meeting. Really nothing significant to report. I just have to point out that Swatera does run a really good treatment plant, and they are always within permit limits, and they are always statistically very conscious of cost. So I have to just give a shout out to Swatera there. They do an excellent job in that regard. Nothing to report. Kevin, do you have anything to add on that? There's really nothing to report there. Yep. And then finally, I just wanted to give the board the update. I did put in your packet the pole building. As you're aware, it's in the budget for the township authority to construct a pole building behind the existing operations facility with the needed storage with our sewer replacement crew and the expansion of our facilities and equipment. HRG has done a good job getting a sketch plan. So the next step is they will send this drawing out to vendors and get us a cost. We have $250,000 total in the budget for engineering and construction. The initial estimate from Chris Kirchie without the vendor is basically you're looking at close to $100,000 for the building, site costs of about 50 to 60. So we're expecting to come in under the $250,000 budget, but we'll have more information once HRG gets a estimate. Now, another wrinkle to this was after talking to Mr. Gottschall and our staff, one of the things we want to do, at least for the authority and the township to look at, is we have the old authority garage was sold to the township for $1, and no one really knows what the best use of that facility is. Right now, it's being used for storage. So I spoke to Mr. Gottschall, and we agreed it would be a good idea while we're doing this process to also have HRG look at the cost to upgrade the existing garage for its HVAC equipment, water, sewer, and just to give the board some options for either the authority or other township uses for storage.
Is that Walnut Street?
Walnut Street, yes, thank you. And we'll be presenting that to the board, if not in March, then in May, on a recommendation on how to proceed with the pole building.
Bill,
Yes.
Friendship Center storing stuff over there right now?
They are, at the old garage, yes. Which Jeff has a plan, I think, for future facilities potentially, right? For the, yeah. Right.
Good.
That concludes my township reports. I'll be happy to answer any questions on my report tonight.
Bill,
Yes.
we talked about this when we were out there on the little tour. When are we going to notify the neighbors that we're looking into, because I don't want to get in trouble, that we're looking into putting this pole barn up?
We're looking at it right now, and Jason from HRG can comment better than I can on this. We don't require, we were not going to be required to do any kind of land development or subdivision planning. We're not going to require a zoning permit to be issued, but I think Jason's going to recommend that we do acquire a zoning permit. Is that correct? You want to?
Yeah, that was kind of the initial thought when we were going through the planning for the pole building, to go through the process of obtaining a zoning permit, just as any other property owner in the township would be burdened with.
And then we could certainly do whatever the board would require staff to do to notify the public in the surrounding area. I do have to point out that the pole building would not in any way change any traffic or any operations on our facility. It's all the existing staff. We are not increasing staff, we're increasing just the material storage. And I don't believe, I can't say this for certain until I go around the areas and look, but I believe the storage shed and the tower that is down there now will actually block the height of the pole building. Do you think that's true, Jeff?
Yeah, just for point of record, most of this will be veiled by the salt shed. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
So, for the most part, you won't be able to see it because of the salt shed.
from the
Yeah.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right.
Were we moving the kennel over there or not? I can't remember.
That was never really decided.
Okay.
Right now, it seems to be okay where it is, but
Okay.
Right.
if we would want to move
I
it
just
to-
know we had talked before if we were going to do anything down there because of what happened before with the Public Works building, that we said that we would at least have the courtesy to notify them.
We can
You
do
know,
that.
I that's just myself. I don't know
Yeah.
about you guys, but I think we should.
Wanted to make it appear we snuck something in.
Exactly. We're trying to be transparent, and I just think just out of the courtesy.
We can certainly do that. If the final decision of this board is to move ahead with the construction, again, we'll bring something back to you in final form in March or May to just basically have the board to agree that staff is permitted, the money's in the budget, of course, that we're authorized to go to bid.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on my report?
Thank you for all your time up here tonight.
Thank you.
Solid effort, Bill. All right, we're going to go to engineers report, the GHD report, which is always very concise.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet tonight, Mr. Chairman, board members. Really just a couple things I wanted to point out. If you look at, you all have GHD's engineers report for the last 3 months, and you can see that it was another very wet 3-month period with 10 significant or extreme wet weather events. So I believe 2018 was second in recent record to probably 2011 in wet weather events. So, and it looks like this year so far is off to a similar start. A vast majority of GHD's work in the last quarter has been on the BC2 ABC and Mini Basin 5B project, getting that ready to bid here in the next month and a half, coordinating with staff and Mr. Klein and HRG on the stormwater side. So that's been our focus. So the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've also circled back around to the smaller Spring Creek project, which is also being financed by the Penvest loan. So we have a few things to clean up on that one before that'll be ready. And, just a point of note, the development activity seems to be pretty steady lately. Melissa has a report on all of our activities there. So does anybody have any questions about our engineers report?
Any questions for GHD at this point? On a serious note, though, I do appreciate the conciseness of your report. I remember years ago, the report would be like 20 pages long. Now it's nice and concise.
It seems
and
to be
gets
getting a little bit shorter every quarter. As Mr. Weaver says, we are slowing down. So that's the good news.
Okay.
And because it's been raining, we have a very short report, so you can always count on the weather to depend on the report that we'll receive.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further business for the board at this point in time? Any further questions? If there's not, we're at the end of this agenda. Well, before we make a motion to adjourn, again, Mr. Gottschall will be announcing a joint supervisors authority meeting for, I believe that would be the 19th of March. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, and that would be at 7 o'clock?
That is
would be
correct.
correct as well? Okay.
Yes.
And then our next official meeting of this board will be at this point in time, May 28th, which would be the fourth Tuesday of May. Okay, hearing no other business at this time, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.